Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 27th of December, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that really easily anywhere you are. If you have cell phone coverage or phone access, 1-800-472-0391. Simply remember the numbers where you want to go next time, and you can make that dialing just a little bit faster. Weather.gov/Alaska is the easy way to find all of our National Weather Service products and services online for you. And once you click on that map, you'll be taken to your local weather forecast office, Fairbanks, Juneau, or Anchorage. You can also easily access the Alaska Aviation Weather information or hit the National Tsunami Warning Center or the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center for information around your part of Alaska. And when you can't find what you want, you have a question about what you see, or have some suggestions about what you would like to see in the future, whether it's this show or anything else we do here in Alaska, please email me. david.snider@noaa.gov is a very easy way to find me. Here's a look around Alaska today. We don't have any warnings, watches, or advisories. We're worried a little bit about some of the cold air going through White Pass. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, let's just take a glance up to Golovin. Hi, Golovin. You got a little bit of sea ice working up there. It looks kind of thin right now across the coast, but looks like a generally okay day in Golovin there. Generally clear sky under the effects of big high pressure across the west coast there in the south-facing coast of the Seward Peninsula. So that's a look at Golovin there from our FAA aviation weather camera and connections with the FAA. You can certainly check those cameras out anytime. Make sure you're doing that. Haines looking up down into the valley there, and the other direction going up in White Pass. It's going to be cold tonight. Looking for wind chill values at least of 25 below. If it gets even colder than that, that's when we start talking about wind chill advisories. And it looks like with the winds blowing through White Pass, it's possible that we might reach a point where they'd be about 30 to 35 below. So as of this afternoon, that had not happened yet, but certainly going to be cold and a lot of wind blowing through there, so it will feel cold and there will be a wind chill. The question is, how much? So either way, if it were me, I'd take the big coat. If you're going up to through White Pass tonight or coming back the other way, give your friends and neighbors a little bit of a hint and say, dress warm, just in case. Here's a look at Soldotna down on the Kenai Peninsula, and you can see high pressure's trapped a lot of that kind of moisture closer to the ground there across the coastal plain area there, just west of the Chugach. And, ice fog is forming across many locations today. You can see that all throughout south central. And it should make the trees just a beautiful white. You can see that process has already kind of started there in Soldotna. So soon to be a gorgeous picture this evening with the sun setting. And as you get into the morning hours tomorrow, it'll be a beautiful sunrise with a new layer of white and hoarfrost on so many things out there. Just a beautiful time of the year for sure. Let's take a look at the satellite picture, and you can see the effects of high pressure all the way around Alaska. A lot of clear conditions across the northern Gulf. High pressure is putting air over southeastern Alaska, flowing out into the northern Gulf. We've got a high here across eastern Asia, and another wave of high pressure here across the northern western Yukon, and a weak area of low pressure working across the northern Gulf. You can see that kind of moving through, allowing some clouds to filter into the region. Another wave of low pressure here across the west coast. And then all the clouds out west are feeding into the next weather maker across the northern Pacific and eventually the western Bering Sea. You can see kind of that convergence pushing into western parts of the Aleutians right now. Other than that, conditions are pretty dry across most of the state. We've got a few pockets of snow across the west coast there, areas across southwestern Alaska and into parts of the lower and middle Yukon Valley, but overall conditions are not really making a whole lot of snow, just hit and miss here and there. Weak cold fronts working across the west. I say weak because the high pressure system behind it is 1,047 millibars, and we have a 1,037 millibar low. That's only 10 millibars difference there, so this would be low pressure, but it's barely low pressure. It's anything else, we call that a high. Low pressure across the northern Gulf's only at 1,024 millibars. And you can see it's kind of that boundary between some of the really dry and colder air coming over the Chugach and parts of southeast and the Wrangell-St. Elias region and Boundary Mountains and than the drier air across the northern Gulf. So big difference there. And then the high is just controlling all of the Bering Sea, and that is going to continue with time. The frontal boundary falls apart as we go through tonight. You can see another trough here across the Alcan, another across the Kotzebue Sound, Norton Sound region. We lose our kind of boundary between that drier air pushing out to sea and then eventually what's still out over the Gulf. That will kind of mix out a little bit, but for southeast, it means breezy conditions at least, probably some strong winds from time to time, nothing really at a warning level, but enough to really make it feel cold, but enough to keep it clear as well. So plan for that. Low pressure will sit out here just west of Haida Gwaii and keep periods of rain, maybe some snow mixed in from time to time. Out across the chain, look for periods of rain and snow there. Our low pressure system still south of the chain, and watch for some areas of snow across the north slope there, especially for Barrow, Kaktovik, Prudhoe Bay, and Dead Horse all the way out toward Wainwright. As we get into Thursday, still very dry conditions across south central. We might see some snow showers just outside of Prince William Sound and into the Barren Islands region. Clouds are trying to sneak their way northward into Ketchikan, perhaps into Heidelberg, as far north as Heidelberg, Craig, Klawock perhaps, and light snow continues across the north. Notice the pressure gradient starting to tighten up just a little bit here. That could mean some stronger winds blowing through, but it looks like northerly winds, though, will be the thing. And what that means is colder temperatures for places that are generally ice-free right now across the Chukchi Sea and the Bering Strait. So maybe some improvement in those conditions here, but the wind will still be moving. Across the chain, you see a low pressure system working northward. That's getting a little closer, starting to build the winds in a little bit more. Southerly winds at that. That means rain, and rain mixed with snow, and probably watching for at least some gales. We'll have to see about the storms as we get into Thursday and Friday. As we get into Friday afternoon, the pressure gradient out across the Bering is really starting to tighten up. So again, we're going to get this northerly wind pulled into low pressure across the North Pacific at 961 millibars there. That's a decent low. And that's moving air across the Alaska Peninsula, being fed in by colder high pressure across the central and eastern interior. And a low is working up the eastern Gulf. That's going to start moving more clouds across southern parts of southeast. Maybe not a whole lot of precipitation just yet. Remember, we're still feeding in that colder, drier air through White Pass and the Lynn Canal. So that'll keep a lot of that in check, but notice the weather is really starting to kind of form up again across the west coast, across the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, Savunga and Gamble both, and areas of light snow just west of the Alaska Range. So conditions are starting to change as we get toward Friday and Saturday. It is cold. Let's talk about temperatures. In your part of southeast, you're looking at teens, maybe 20s across the outer and southern coast. Prince William Sound in places like Gulkana, you're looking at readings anywhere from 5 to 10 below. South central, some places might dip into the single digits tonight, at least. Homer, maybe Seward, you're looking at temps in the teens, maybe the low 20s. 29 in Kodiak, minus 14 in Fairbanks, minus 16 in Eagle, and minus 32 in Northway. It's going to be a cold night there, and in Fort Yukon, minus 26. Anywhere from 5 to 10 above across the North Slope. Warmer there than in the upper Tanana Valley tonight. And 11 degrees in Nome, 14 in Shishmaref. McGrath, you're looking at temps about 17 below. Bristol Bay, low to mid-teens. 25 in St. Paul, 21 in Savunga, high of 21 there, 22 tomorrow. 9 in Barrow, 26 below in Fort Yukon for a high temperature, or at least the warmer part of the day if there is one. 24 below for Northway. South Central, teens and 20s for highs tomorrow. 36 in Kodiak, 20s for the most part in southeast, maybe a few places in the coast like Sitka, making it up to 33. 31 in St. Paul, 24 for Nunivak Island, 20s and 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, 35 for Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. Friday morning, big cold Northway, 40 below. For Yukon, 26 below. 1 below for Barrow, getting cold now around Wainwright at 4 below. Kotzebue Sound temperatures above 0 to about 10 above. 7 above for Nome, 20 for St. Lawrence Island. 19 below for McGrath. Galena, you're looking at 13 below. Tanana, 18 below. These are morning low temperatures on Friday. Single digits and teens for South Central. 32 in Kodiak. Sandpoint, about 26 above. Highs on Friday, 30s and 40s for the Alaska Peninsula all the way through the chain. 30 in St. Paul. Fairbanks down to 9 below. 30 below, again, not really warming up much in Northway. 20s and 30s for Southeast. South Central, teens and 20s. The North Slope anywhere from 0 to about 3 to 4 below. Looks like Unalakleet about 6 above. The cold will stay with us as we head through the weekend.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, IFR will continue across the coastal plain and up parts of the Yukon Valley and the northern side of the Seward Peninsula. Hit and miss across the Bering Sea, and we'll be watching for some areas of ice fog around the Copper River Valley. With extreme high pressure sitting across the western Yukon, we may trap more of that low-level moisture in as we have again this morning. Look for areas of MVFR across the Gulf. That's going to stay pretty much out of southeastern Alaska and really a large part of the interior, the Kuskokwim Valley. You'll start to see MVFR again across the Yukon Delta and generally north of the Yukon Valley with widespread IFR across the coastal plain. And the next weather makers creeping in from the west and southwest, you'll find IFR across the central and western Aleutians creeping in a little bit further into the Bering Sea itself. For Friday morning, look for IFR conditions across the north. Southeast still looking pretty good, and VFR there for most of the Alaska Range passes, the Kuskokwim Valley, as well as really most of the Yukon Valley. And once we get into Friday afternoon, watch for a hit and miss IFR across the north. IFR conditions for areas around St. Paul and St. George. MVFR spreading up the Kuskokwim Valley now into more parts of the Susitna and Matanuska and along the eastern Alaska Range. Southeast still in the clear for VFR. IFR conditions around Kodiak Island and rounding around the front across the central and eastern Aleutians to wrap up your Friday afternoon. Here's your pass conditions now for your Thursday. Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan Pass we expect to start at MVFR, heading for IFR conditions as we go through the end of the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass expected to see a nice start, but watch for some lower ceilings and visibility as the day goes on, heading for MVFR conditions there. Rainy Pass expected to be visual flight rule through most of the day. Same goes for Windy Pass there. VFR is expected all of Thursday. Isabel Pass looking at VFR conditions through your Thursday. Mentasta Pass looking pretty good. Teneda Pass we're going to watch for VFR conditions there. Portage Pass may flirt with MVFR most of the day, generally to the south, but I think it will creep into the eastern side of the pass itself. Chilkoot and White Pass expected to be VFR all day long. Your surface freezing line now is still hovering very close to the Pribilovs out in the Bering Sea. The next weather maker is trying to push some warmer weather closer to the Aleutians, but for right now, that 2,000-foot line is well to the south. And the same goes for what we see in the Gulf. The 2,000-foot freezing line is as close as Haida Gwaii, with the surface freezing line closer to the north and eastern Gulf Coast and sitting right on top of Kodiak Island. Icing potential is generally limited to areas above 4,000 feet for the Gulf and closer to Kodiak Island. When you get up to the north, especially north of the Brooks Range, you'll have to stay below 8,000 feet to find that perfect cold air there below about 20 degrees C. Out across the west, St. Lawrence Island to St. Matthew, looking at areas around 2,000 feet and above, and the same goes for the central and western chain. Isolated moderate right now at best. That's generally above 5,000 feet. The jet stream is undergoing some changes. Right now we have high pressure sitting across the interior with a strong southwesterly flow coming up through the Bering Strait. Out across the southern regions there in the northern Gulf Coast, you can still see our ridge in place across parts of the Yukon, and that's locking in the cold for the moment. But out west, you can see kind of a really stretched and elongated trough that's moving generally west to east instead of north to south. And in this case, it's because it's running into blocking high pressure systems across eastern Asia and the interior. So a lot going on for us. The main storm track is well to our south. Those wind speeds still holding at around 130 knots or so. At 9,000 feet, low pressure is in charge of the interior. You can see that southerly flow wrapping into the region there. High pressure to the north and to the west. Easterlies continue across the coastal plain. Northerlies coming down into the Bering Strait. If this moves over a little bit more parts of Alaska will be in that much colder northerly flow. And here's our low pressure trough we saw in the jet stream level there. That is still bringing in southerlies to the Bering Sea and to the chain. And you'll notice wind speeds there across the central and eastern Gulf holding at around 15 to 25. Light winds there still blowing offshore, helping to keep VFR conditions for southeast as we go into Thursday. Low pressure in the interior, keeping southerlies around the Alcan, north and easterly winds across the coastal plain, and light northwesterlies coming into parts of Bristol Bay and westerlies at 10 knots over Kodiak Island. Our stronger southerlies are here at this level as well for the central and eastern Aleutians, anywhere from 40 to 60 knots from the south and southeast. So our turbulence factor will really keep an eye on parts of the western Brooks Range again, where we saw those stronger winds coming in from the north over the region. That'll generally be in the morning below 4,000 feet. Across the Aleutians, anywhere from about Unalaska and Dutch Harbor all the way out toward Kiska and Shemya. Watch for areas of considerable moderate as those winds are starting to pick up with the next weather maker coming in from the south once again. And areas across southern parts of southeast, generally below 4,000 feet, you're probably only looking at isolated moderate in that area, but with winds still rushing off the mountains and wrapping into low pressure, it's a little bit stronger to your south and east. We'll be keeping an eye on some of the thumps and bumps that are possible in your area. So once again, areas up in the west, probably only a morning issue. We'll be back with a look at your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Mount McKinley in the background, and you're looking real good. Yeah, Roger. We'll be going downhill, dragging it down, and then take a look at the tracks and feel the snow, and then possibly land. Okay, well, I'll circle over you and keep an eye on you. I'll box you down. Okay, we'll be breaking off underneath you. Okay, we'll stay up. And usually I go through a gump, the word gump, meaning gas, undercarriage, prop, mixture, prop, gump. G-U-M-P, and that generally gets me set up for landing. So my gas is on both tanks, my undercarriage is in the ski position, locked. My mixture at this altitude should be about 15 GPH at this setting. I know the elevation of the glacier is where we'll be landing is about 7,000. The light is good, but we don't have any sunlight right on the spot. We'll be coming in high, taking a go-over, drag our skis, take a look at it, get a feeling for the depth of the snow, and then turn around. If the snow doesn't feel like it's too deep, we'll turn around and land. This also gives us a feel of the glacier of how it's rolling. That's okay. We're just feeling the snow out is what we're doing here. Feels like we got a good snowpack. It's all right. We've got probably about a foot of snow or so on top of a hard pack, so we're not going to disappear into the powder or anything. How does it feel, Doug? That feels good, Lowell. We've got about, feels like about a foot of snow on there on top of a good pack. I think it'll be real good. I'm going to go on in and land, and it looks like they got a big hole there where somebody was camping. And we'll mark that and probably pull up there. It seems like a good flat spot. Okay, well, I'll come in after you. I'll notice that hole. I'll be sure to miss that one, too. Okie doke. So we're on final southeast port. Okay, I see you. This is the touchy part now, because now on our way in, there's no chance for a go-around. You're just going straight in. All right. I lost my reference. We're going to have to go by and drop those bags off. We'll need you to hold the bags real tight and try to hold your hand outside the window. And then when I say now, towards the bottom of the hill there, that's where we'll have to drop them at the bottom. That'll give me a reference. Go ahead and throw them both out at the same time, and that'll give me a line also. Okay, now. I think he probably blew his hat clean off, I think. I think you can wait in here if you like. We probably won't be here much longer. Yeah, watch the door so it won't. Matter of fact, could you shut this one so it won't blow? Okay, that's good. You wouldn't think about it, but one of the more important factors would probably be just a real good shovel. If you ever need a shovel, you'll want a good one. Sometimes the cheap, lighter models that are easy to pack will break or fail on you. It's real important to have a good snow shovel when you're going into these areas and operating on skis. Sometimes you really need it and you want it to work for you.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
For a quick check of your sea ice edge across the north, we still have a few areas with some lower concentrations, generally from Barrow to about Wainwright, and also north and east of Kaktovik and Prudhoe Bay. You can see still there's plenty of open water through the Bering Strait into the Chukchi Sea. However, we've been talking about that big area of high pressure across eastern Asia that's giving us northerly winds that should help to cool the air temperature down, which is a big part of this, and eventually slow the winds down a little bit more. That is also a huge part of this. The sea surface temperatures are okay. So once we get into that pattern for the rest of the week and kind of hold there maybe into the early part of the week, next week conditions will probably be growing more ice in that region, and we've already seen more ice developing across southern parts of Norton Sound and Kotzebue Sound. So improvements are already happening, and we're also seeing some newer ice across southwestern Alaska and once again inside of Cook Inlet. So we're moving in the right, more normal winter direction. This is the analysis as of the 27th, and as always, you can check the latest sea ice analysis and forecast anytime by going to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Here's a look at the weather in southeast. As you would imagine, with high pressure on the interior and across western Canada, a lot of air is moving through and into southeast. Look for strong northerlies through the Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, and Clarence Strait. Gusts in Stevens Passage up to 45 knots there. Northerlies through the Lynn Canal are going to create some pretty substantial wind chills. A wind chill advisory now issued, in fact, for the White Pass area for tonight and into tomorrow with those 40-knot winds. 7-foot seas there. Otherwise, offshore winds not too bad. North and easterlies anywhere from 10 to 25. The highest seas down south near the Dixon entrance with 9-foot seas there. By the time we get into Friday, look for winds to come up even more. Northerlies to 40 knots with gusts to 55. Gusts to 50 inside of Stevens Passage, and easterlies coming through the Clarence Strait with gusts to 45 knots and 5-foot seas there. So a lot of bursts of wind and an offshore flow that continues 20 to 25, 7 to 8-foot seas expected there on Friday. For Thursday in southeast or south central, gentle winds 10 to 15 knots in all areas, 2-foot seas inside of Prince William Sound, 2 to 4-foot seas inside of Cook Inlet, and 7-foot seas across the north and western areas of the Gulf, down to 4 to 5-foot seas on Friday. Northeasterlies remain light inside of Prince William Sound, and 10 to 15 knots from the north and east through Cook Inlet as we go on Friday. In Bristol Bay, 20 knots from the north and east on Thursday, 3-foot seas there, 4-foot seas down the coast, otherwise 15 knots across the Pacific inside of Shelikof Strait as well. 5 to 10-foot seas expected anywhere across the Pacific on Thursday. As we get into Friday, winds change a little bit more out of the east, 20 to 35 knots at most, with the seas coming up through the Alaska Peninsula waters there. 20 to 30 knots through the Bering Sea with 4 to 9-foot seas expected on the Bering on Friday. Now across the Aleutians, remember we had that wave of weather coming in from the south and west. As that approaches the central and western Gulf, we're going to start to see storm force winds developing out across the region, looking for 6 to 12-foot seas across the eastern chain, 18-foot seas in the Pacific, and then from the central and west on, 25 to 30-foot seas with winds up to 50 knots on Thursday. And you can see things settle out a little bit more on Friday. You're looking for 25 to 35-knot winds across the region, 17 to 19-foot seas across the Bering Sea coast, 19 to 23-foot seas across the Pacific coast with that easterly flow, and changing winds across the west, anywhere from 25 to 45 knots with 17 to 25-foot seas from Kiska to Attu. Out across the west coast, looking at northerlies inside of Norton Sound over the ice, northeasterlies blowing offshore 15 to 25, anywhere from 4 to 7-foot seas through the Pribilofs, St. Matthew Island waters and St. Lawrence Island waters. Nunivak Island and East Olin Strait, you're looking at 20 to 25-knot winds and 5 to 6-foot seas. Easterlies through the Pribilofs, St. Matthew, you're looking at 11-foot seas there, and northeasterlies once again over Norton Sound at 15 knots. For the north slope, north and easterly winds over the ice at 20 knots. Northeasterlies coming down through Cape Lisburne and Point Hope about 20 to 30 knots. Northerlies outside of Kotzebue Sound with a 6-foot sea. Northeasterlies over the open water, 7-foot seas expected there. Watch out for heavy freezing spray in the region. 20 to 25 knot winds there with 6 to 9-foot seas in the open waters. Otherwise, east and northeasterlies for the Beaufort Seacoast and around Point Barrow as we head into your Friday. Let's recap tonight's weather, and it's all about the high pressure system. 1,045 millibars there across eastern Asia. This is cold stuff, and it is blowing that cold air through the Bering Strait. It will make snowfall possible across some of the lower terrain around Point Barrow, eastward toward Kaktovik, and then we run into another big area of high pressure. It's pushing a lot of wind over southeast. That'll keep the winds up and the wind chills down for places like White Pass. A wind chill advisory now in effect for your region. Areas of clouds and rain should stay off to the south, but a new wave of weather coming in from the south over the Pacific toward the Aleutians will crank up the winds as we saw at a storm force in many locations. And watching for gales and others, periods of rain and snow may fall there for Thursday with a chance for some light snow showers outside of the Kenai Peninsula and inside of Prince William Sound. Also from St. Matthew up toward St. Lawrence Island on Thursday. As we go into Friday, high pressure settles in a little bit more across the eastern interior. Temperatures will stay cold as we go into the weekend. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.